But that's really where you come back to point number 5, which is focusing on those best-of-breed applications that really create a value. Whether you'd be talking about meter reading, or you'd be talking about police video surveillance, or gunshot indicators as a lead-in for a 911 call, et cetera. But we've gone through and we've taken a look at this. The extension of the core is a key functionality. You've already invested in the core. How do you take advantage of that investment, extend the core through a mobility strategy? How do you take an RFE and an economic viable model and create that so that it is truly a win-win? We stepped through, I'm going to step through and I'll talk a little bit more about each of these as we go through the presentation. But best-of-breed applications, always key. How do you create the viable model from a productivity standpoint, quality of life within the community, reduction of cost for the overall community, as well as revenue production? Taking a look at scalable design, how do you make sure that the design that you're putting in works from the proof of concept all the way through the full integration? How do you make sure you're partnering with the appropriate people? And every one of these has to go down to, for the overall community, how do we change the quality of life? How do we help drive economic development? And where you see models for this, and I would go back to that overall circle, where we've seen struggles is when you're looking at only a portion of these, of the overall incidences. And if you're focusing just on the quality of life and economic development without really focusing on things that would create value for the community, that's where we struggle with the overall viability. And I think we've seen that in some of the recent announcements. Okay? If it's only focused on subscription service and ad-based revenue, then we have a struggle as far as how we deploy these things in a wide and encompassing way. We found that there's an extensive ecosystem involved with success. Okay? It's not just about the hardware. It's not just about the integration services. There's a major circle of influence in this. And each one of these is very key as far as the overall process. Without the upfront strategy and the integration strategy, it can't work. You need to have the appropriate network infrastructure so that the network becomes the platform for growth. You need to have the appropriate applications providers. Without a focus on applications that provide value, focused on quality of life, productivity, cost reduction, as well as the overall revenue capabilities, it's not going to work. We've also found a very nice fit for the nonprofit organizations. This is where you gain the groundswell. This is where you get the inclusion of multiple parties within the community. And this is where we find the overall integrated strategy. In addition, obviously network integration. And the service providers play a key role, okay, in the overall process, especially as we're taking a look at opportunities where we're including public access. Business models, I know this has gone through. We've talked a lot about business models as a course of this conference and many conferences in the past. We are seeing the most activity in the municipal owned and operated environment. This is specifically because these are purpose-built networks that are performing a specific value. This is a value that is seen well enough, whether it's meter reading or it's public safety focused. We're seeing opportunities where communities are seeing the value to the extent that they're willing to pay the upfront costs, they're willing to pay the ongoing costs. At the same time, the wholesale model is a very interesting model. This really started in many ways. You think about the airport environment. Okay, it's a unique environment. The airport puts in a municipal environment for wireless access, and then they open it up and they will wholesale it out to anybody that wants to come in to provide services. You see this up in Canada as well, on the Alberta SuperNet, where they've actually provided a infrastructure in place, wholesaling it out so that any service provider that wants to come in and utilize that infrastructure now has access to all the citizens within Alberta. Pretty interesting environment. More and more, we're seeing the public-private partnership. This is the environment where you see a private entity coming in, funding the venture, working in conjunction with the city, whereby we're getting assets in return. But this is also the place where we really have to have a key decision as far as how we're going to utilize this network to really, again, go back and focus on the value. In our focus as a company, we are looking at it from a standpoint of whether the city owns it or the SP owns it. You really have to have skin in the game, if you will. The last conference down in Dallas, I was particularly impressed There were people from the user community, from the municipalities, challenging people on stage, the SPs. Who owns this? What happens if you, the SP, go out of business? How does the city have a stake in this to make sure that you're doing the right thing if they don't have any engagement? So it's a very important thing that we have, that skin in the game and make sure that people are focused on it. And that's also an important piece as you take a look at community advocates. And again, I come back to it from a standpoint of the nonprofit community. How do we start pulling more people into this that can really gain a benefit? From a Cisco standpoint, it's all about leverage. Okay? We want to make sure that people that have invested in Cisco have an opportunity to use that investment, not build a brand new network, but actually leverage the investment that they've already had. But it has to be based on the things that are going to help drive long-term success, like the integration of partners and consultants, like applications that really drive value, and specifically the technology that's going to give you the capability of extending that core to the locations that you need